Hi, everyone. Is everyone having a great day today? We're so impressed with this show. It's been amazing. We've met so many amazing companies. Thank you so much for joining our chat. We're going to go through this short presentation, and then at the end, we have some time for Q&As. We also have a little pamphlet with some digital marketing tips and tricks. If you'd like to take something home with you, you can come visit us after the presentation. So just to introduce ourselves, my name's Katie. I'm co-founder of Marigold PR, Cannabis Communications, and our subscription box program, Candora. This is our account manager, Brooke Wilkinson. We work with cannabis brands of all sizes, helping them with branding, positioning, communication strategy, PR strategies, and social media. We also produce a lot of content, and we have some insights to share with you that will hopefully help market your business and position your business.
Great. So what we're going to talk about today is walk you through some of the challenges first of cannabis marketing. I'm sure anybody in business here knows that there are some unique challenges to the business. But then we're also going to touch on, Katie's going to touch on how to overcome those challenges and how to execute so that you can successfully market your cannabis or cannabis-related brand. So some of the challenges that are definitely out there with cannabis, first up is stigma. So there's obviously still the stigma around cannabis. Legalization is just coming in Canada in July 2018. In a lot of the states, it's not legalized, and there is still a bit of a stigma there. It's kind of similar to alcohol, where you wouldn't want photos of yourself possibly all over your Facebook drinking a glass of wine or something like that. So there can be some unique challenges in getting people to share your product, to share your posts, and engage with your product in a way that they might with a more traditional product. The next one there is regulations. So with cannabis, it's a little bit more difficult. You can't market cannabis in the way on Facebook, on Google advertisements, Google AdWords, the way that you would many of the traditional products. You can't boost posts related to your products. So Katie's going to get into a little bit later how you can overcome the regulations by influencer marketing, by some other things. And then the other one there is knowledge. We've met a ton of people as we've been working in the industry, and we find that there is a breadth of knowledge. So there is the person who knows almost nothing about cannabis and is just really emerging into the community as it's becoming legalized. Then there are the people who do know a lot. So you've got to kind of educate your consumer and figure out what your consumer's level or your customer's level of knowledge is, and help to educate them if their knowledge is not there so that they can kind of engage with your product.
And so we talked quickly about what makes cannabis different, but what makes cannabis the same as every other brand that you're building, any other product that you're marketing, is that it's always about your audience. So, brands sometimes find a challenge putting themselves first, but really, at the end of the day, it's all about your audience, and it's about defining the benefit that you bring to your consumer. So clearly, a recreational brand is going to have a very different benefit to their consumer than a medical brand. And so it's important to understand who you're targeting, what they're interested in, and how you can really best serve them. So often it's important to do research, it's important to have conversations, focus groups, really get a sense of who you're trying to serve and what makes them unique and how you can fill that gap in terms of the knowledge gap that there might be or the benefit gap. Another thing that is similar between cannabis and any other brand is really this marketing and PR cycle. And so although there are unique challenges, it remains the same, that it's really about creating, it's about sharing, and it's about connecting. And so in terms of creating content, the thing that we advocate the most is it's about authenticity and about authentic content. So it's very important that your consumers feel that you're being true to them and that you have a real position. So it's something to think about when you're building your audiences and building your brand voice, that you're coming across as something consistent and true and something that resonates with people as they experience your brand. The next piece is on sharing. And sharing does have its challenges within the cannabis community because, like Brooke mentioned, not everybody is as open with sharing cannabis content as they might be other types of content. So it's important to think about what works and what your audience will be interested in, and look at your stats and see what's working and see what people are sharing and doing more of those pieces. And then the next piece, which we can't overstate, is connection. I think, it's very, very interesting being part of cannabis in this space. Partnerships, collaborations, one-to-one connections with your customers and other like-minded brands. It's a very, very collaborative space, and together, as brands come together, and you see it with events like this and sponsorships, that message is a lot stronger than an individual brand. So, think about the types of brands that you could partner with or the types of companies that you can partner with that really align with your core values. And also think about the types of influencers and the types of people that represent cannabis in the world that you could connect with that would be a really great, authentic brand advocate for what you represent.
So we've talked a little bit about how cannabis is unique and how cannabis is challenging, as well as how it's a little bit the same as traditional public relations, marketing, and PR. So now we're going to walk you through the key success. So first of all, you've got to tell your story, embrace the hustle, understand the role of technology, and then measure and course correct. So first of all, as Katie had mentioned before, you need to make the customer the hero of your story. So you need to discover what makes your cannabis brand valued to your consumer, what gives your brand that value, and what content will they want to share, will they want to engage with, what content adds value to their life, adds value to their cannabis experience in general, and just keep on every single thing that you create. Every single thing you push out on social media, every video, every blog post, every piece of content, make sure that you always have the customer at your core and that you're thinking about what value that post, that product, anything is adding to them, because that's how they're going to engage with your brand.
Exactly. And then moving into our next point, it's really about, in this new world of digital marketing, digital PR, it's really about embracing the hustle. You need to get quick and you need to get great at what you're doing. And so, you don't want to pump out a bunch of content that is irrelevant to your audience, but you really do want to get to a place where you can produce content at a frequency that makes people want to engage with you and want to follow you. So, this really leads into cultivating community. And there are lots of different ways, and we've heard different speakers here today talk about different ways that you can cultivate community. But in marketing, it really breaks down to three kind of avenues, which is own, earned, and paid. So in terms of owned media, some of the examples there are your own social pages or your newsletter list that you've built or your website. And then on the earned side, blogger and influencer engagement, shares and media coverage, all those kinds of pieces. And on the paid side, some examples of that are events, sponsorships, advertorials, and things like that. So when you look at this list, really think about all of the different touch points that your brand reaches people and all of the different ways that you have an opportunity to engage. Find your consistent message and find your community. Cultivate that community and put some effort into it, because really, with the advertising restrictions, it limits your ability to do things in the way you would traditionally do it. So traditionally, when you're launching a brand, you throw a ton of money at a media buy. You buy lots of whatever advertising makes sense to you and you run with it. We're faced with different challenges. And so if you really break it down into kind of the owned, earned, and paid pillars and start to think about all the different ways that you can reach people authentically through those pillars, you're going to see a lot more success. And all of those little pieces add up to a really big story. So there's still lots of hope for really great campaigns. And some of the brands here are doing a fabulous job. But just try to be a little bit creative and consistent and authentic. I can't say authentic enough.
Yep. So embracing the role of technology is the next one. Part of our handout, we've actually got some really great do's and don'ts for each platform. So embracing the platform and kind of figuring out what to do and what not to do there. So if you'd like to come by and grab a handout after our chat, we'd love to chat one-to-one with anybody too. So the other thing is sentiment by content type. So a lot of the things that we're sharing in a cannabis brand, you want to make sure typically that you're getting a neutral to positive reaction for your content. You can see up here, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but it's pretty typical for the things that work for traditional brands. Again, going back to how cannabis can be similar to other brands. Videos work, making fun of your customers doesn't. Making fun of your competition might work and having a little bit of fun there. GIFs can work. Joining conversations and talking about events can work. And that is actually one that we do think is really important and maybe should be a little bit higher on this list here. Joining the conversation is key. when you're promoting a cannabis brand, because we've discovered there's so many great communities out there online, so many great groups, or even just joining the conversation in person. That's such a great way to get your positioning out there, talk to like-minded people, and make those, again, authentic, as Katie keeps mentioning, authentic connections that you want in this industry that are going to push your brand forward.
For sure. And the piece I'd add to that too is you see the list and really it's level of effort, right? Like out of the gate, video is significantly more challenging than grabbing a GIF or grabbing a piece of material that already exists. Responding to questions is also, a lot of resources, but super important and goes back to that one-to-one connection. And if you're going to be in a forum, if you're going to be leveraging social, if you're going to be on all these different platforms, you need to manage your audience's expectations. So if they're going to be asking you questions, and it's important that you're there to be a part of that dialogue, or you're kind of losing the last slide, which is cultivating that community and making sure that you're fostering a place where people feel that they can connect with you and they can ask questions and they can get to know the brand a little bit deeper. Because like we said before, the education piece, and lots of people have been talking about this today, there's such a huge education piece involved. And one-to-one connections, I can't think of a better way to answer a custom question from a client or a customer and really make them feel like their voice and their desires and their needs have been heard and have been met.
And then the last one here is measure and course correct. This couldn't be more important in the cannabis industry, in marketing in general, but in the cannabis industry in particular. We're all really learning on our feet in this very, very emerging industry. But it's very important that you're keeping an eye on your Facebook analytics, you're monitoring, you're checking your sentiment type. Every single day you're going into the back end of your website and checking out what's working, what isn't, so that you can measure and you can course correct. You can keep doing more of what's working and what's, maybe minimum effort with maximum return, and do less of what doesn't work.
Most definitely. And, the analytics side of things can seem a little daunting if that's new for you or if that's not something that you've had a lot of experience with. But they're fairly user-friendly, and really getting a sense of what's interesting to your audience versus what isn't, that's a big step in the right direction. And it's a great way to start to frame out your communications plan and your plan for the rest of the year, so that you're working off what works, doing more of what works, and kind of putting aside the stuff that isn't resonating. And what doesn't work is almost as important as what does, because that tells you a lot about your audience and what they're interested in and what they're interested in hearing from you. In terms of key takeaways, we kind of flew through this presentation, but if there's only 4 things that you take away from this today, number 1, really defining your audience and defining your brand positioning. And so, this is kind of marketing 101. This is exactly where, brands should be starting. And it's kind of fast and furious right now. And, this is something to look at over a course of time. So get yourself out of the gate with something that you believe in. Look at your results, look at your community, and see what they're telling you and see what they're defining for you. And from there, then you can help redefine and kind of hone your positioning to make sure that you really are delivering on your authentic values and your true brand voice. And then the next piece, I think I've said the word authentic 15 to 20 times. Drive sales through authentic connections. And again, that goes back to community management, to engaging with customers, engaging with clients, replying to questions, replying on Facebook, replying on email. If you have an email marketing campaign, giving people an opportunity to give you feedback after you've sent out some information, really important. A lot of the times, what we can learn from other businesses is that the more deeply you are connected to your customer and the more you understand your customer, the more they're going to actually believe in you. When we look at authentic connections, we talked a little bit about this. Influencers provide a really unique field for us, but at the end of the day, if that influencer doesn't match your core brand values, they don't really make sense for you to be working with. So always kind of going back to who you are, making sure that's in the forefront of your story. And then leveraging technology for success. And so this is where, obviously we'd love to work with everybody here, but at the end of the day, getting yourself some training, it's the cost to play these days. You need to be well versed in technology. You need to understand what it's doing for your business, and you need to understand if you're spending money on resources to post to social or to create a PR campaign and to craft communications and send out a release, that you need to understand what it's doing for your business. And we're very lucky that we are in a time where we can measure what we're doing and we can course correct as we go along. And then the last piece we truly believe in is that, PR and social media is really the key social currency for cannabis. And it's really the avenue right now that provides the most opportunity for you to create a unique brand experience and a unique environment for your customers. So, there's a lot of different tools that we can be using, but if you think about the ones that are going to resonate the best and really focus on what's going to work and what's working for your audience, you'll see a lot more success than really trying to spread yourself so thin across all the different avenues. So those are really the 4 takeaways that we'd like you to consider. We have a little bit of time to do some Q&A if anyone has any questions. We sort of I see a question at the back. And we sort of flew through this intentionally to give us a little bit of time to have a bit of a dialogue. So please jump in if anyone has any questions.
Hey, that's loud. Hey guys, my question is, from the influencers posting, do your clients want to see posts that showcase the product in a medically focused way, or do they want it shown in a way that makes the product look most beautiful, or are they open to being brand like, is their brand dictating that, or how do they want us to interact with their product, I guess is really the question.
Okay, and you're asking as an influencer, I'm guessing.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so, branded content and working with influencers is not brand new, but it's still fairly new to marketers, and a lot of them are doing it wrong. So in terms of what brands are looking for, it really varies depending on their priorities. A lot of people, if you're a medical brand, you may be looking for testimonials, or you may be looking for something that feels a little bit more polished or a little bit more buttoned up, or feels a little bit more authentic, and it's breaking down some of the barriers that you've noticed with your customers, and you're looking for a chance to have that dialogue. A recreational brand kind of opens up the options. And in terms of branded content, it's a really great option to work with influencers, work with web series, work with YouTubers to get your product in their series where it makes sense, because those are pieces you can promote. Those are pieces you can advertise. So if you work with an influencer and they have a really great web series and it's hilarious and it totally fits with your brand and they feature your brand, that's something that you can put on across social and you can put some money against, and you can finally see those reach numbers that you've been waiting for. In any other brand, we all know now that basically social is a pay-to-play situation, and that's where they see most of their activity is through sponsored events. So it's super important to leverage the kind of creative ways to get your brand out there and to sponsor it and actually see the reach and see the big numbers. So thank you for that question.
And I think the other thing about influencers that is so great, because you're kind of wondering, well, do they want to engage with it in a medical way, or do they want it to be gorgeous? The great thing about working with influencers is it is, again, that authentic one-to-one connection where you have a little bit more freedom to work very closely with a person to see what works with their aesthetic, what works with the brand aesthetic, what can we do together that's going to serve us both and going to drive us both forward.
And really, the influencers you want to work with care so much about their brand that they want to do it right? They have some guidelines, they have a look and feel, they have a position, and that's what you're interested in joining, right? You're interested in being a part of the community they've already built and the audience they've already built. It's not about reinventing the wheel. So finding, Instagrammers and YouTubers that really align with you and they reach your audience in a way that makes sense. If you're a local brand, you probably don't need a national, YouTuber or somebody out of the U.S. But if you do online sales and you can sell, North America wide, it brings lots of different opportunities. So again, it's always kind of a customized approach, and being as appropriate as possible, and just making sure you're leveraging the influencers and working with the influencers because of what they bring to the table. It's not really about what you're bringing to the table, because like we said, it's never really about you. It's always about your customer. We got a question.
We got one right here. Sorry, we'll grab you after.
Like, what could you say would be some good posting do's and don'ts for kind of cannabis-related clients? Like, how is a good way to represent the cannabis industry online if that's something you're trying to do? Just from like what's a good way of kind of representing and not? Like, do you have any examples?
Oh, so like a do and do not kind of thing?
Yeah, like, because they're saying that, some of the regulations are going to be because of, like, with the tobacco companies. So then there's all those regulations. So what are some good things that, if we are using social, what are some good practices that we can take from this?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and as some of the regulations evolve and we learn more about those specifically, depending where you're located, it'll impact you differently. But at the end of the day, if you look at the platform and you look at what their regulations are, actually Facebook, Instagram, Google, they all define what they consider prohibited pieces. And it's not just cannabis facing this. We work with someone, and we've worked with a client, and they were a dating service. And Facebook also prohibits dating services from promoting, which is probably good, because you'd be inundated, with those kinds of ads. So I really think at this point, a good place to start is kind of looking at their regulations, the platform regulations, and as we learn more and more about the specific Canadian and province-specific regulations, honing your strategy to align with all those pieces is a good strategy. Also, looking at what works for your brand. I know that doesn't necessarily align with regulations, but at the same time, it's so difficult right now to garner reach on these social platforms that if what you're doing is working, it's honestly probably fine, because they're so limiting. They'll tell you, they'll block what you're doing, or block your advertising, or decline your ads if it's not working. So yeah, I would look at the platform-specific regulations by category, and that tells you a lot about the do's and don'ts. And then there's also some common sense, right? Like, it's really about, you want to target people that are interested in your brand. You don't need to target everybody who may not be interested, or may find it maybe a little bit put off by the things you're putting out, but that rings true with any brand. So cannabis is just additionally challenging. Does that help? Yeah, great.
Yeah, the back right there.
I too am going to ask about regulations, but I think the person up here asked some of it. So government regulations sound like they're going to be very restrictive. What are you in the communications world doing to educate government regulators on what your clients need in order to make a profitable business, and that their regulations are going to hinder the marketing of their product? So are you and your colleagues in the communications world in cannabis working to influence the government and educate them?
I would say we personally are not working with the government in any way. We do need to remain fairly neutral in terms of politics, kind of in our world, especially because of the variety of the brands that we represent. But I know that there are groups and advocates out there that are working with the government. But I think at this point, I don't honestly know that they're overly interested in hearing this position. I think they're really just trying to figure out what's going to work for them, in all honesty. So the long and the short of it is, we're not necessarily working in the policy realm at all, but we do support our clients when they are. So for example, we have clients that have been applying to RFPs in some of the different provinces, and we've been working with them to craft the RFPs and craft their messaging. But at the end of the day, they are beholden to the regulations that come out the same way the rest of us are. And there'll be a big learning curve depending on the news that we hear and the different pieces that we can and can't do. So, that adds another layer to kind of the different challenges. It's not just platform specific, it's not just countrywide, it's not just province-wide. So there's so much that we're going to learn, before July next year. And then there's also, regulations are complicated, but again, there's some common sense pieces. Don't market towards kids. Don't make your brand super kid friendly. Don't use animals and icons and things like that would appeal to children. Be responsible when you're marketing. And so I think that applies, to a lot of different brands that are for adults. So there's a lot of common sense at play when you're thinking about developing your brand, your look and feel, and your tone, your brand tone and message.
Yeah, and I think the other piece there, one of the really, really great things, and that the government can't prevent us from doing, is educating people as well as boosting educational content. That's one of our biggest dues actually on Facebook, is making educational content for our clients and producing that type of content that's teaching people about the product, teaching people about the benefits, the health benefits and things like that. And fortunately, across most platforms, it's news, it's factual information, so you are allowed to boost those type of posts where you wouldn't be able to with a product. So I think there is a huge opportunity with education there, not just for the government, for everybody, the consumer, anybody.
And you hear that theme, there's lots for us to learn, there's lots for all of the consumers to learn, and making sure that education is a component of your brand, I think, is really important. It's so much more than just an FAQ page on a website. It goes so much further than that. And thinking about some of the content types that we had presented, video really resonates. It makes sense that it really resonates. It provides an opportunity to see and hear and all the things we know. And so if we know that really well, make that first in your strategy. Have a video first strategy. It's challenging, but it's going to work and it's going to perform for you. And so thinking about, again, doing more of what works, the education piece definitely works. It's definitely important, and I think it across the board. Like, I actually can't think of a company in here that wouldn't find the education piece relevant to what they're doing.
Okay, any more?
Thanks. Question for you. So this is an industry that's going to go, there's going to be some great growth. There's some growth that's happening now, and like many other industries where there's a run, there'll be some contraction, right, later on. And those winners, many of them are companies that have built their brands very well, right, and have differentiated. So my question is, maybe you can speak to how some of the brands in this room, on the floor here, how they might be, look to differentiate themselves in this market. Some tips that you might want to provide, not only online, but there's online, offline, everywhere.
Right. Yeah, so again, it goes back to your core consumer and your core values. And so what we like to do when we work with people is we go through an exercise called a brand pyramid. And if you know a little bit about branding, it's actually something you can look up and try to work through yourself. But really understanding what your core brand values are is the beginning of differentiating yourself from some of the brands in the room. Tone is another really big piece. Like, are you the best buddy who's always there at the party and you're going to have a really good time? Or are you the more mothering, kind of healing type that is there for an honest dialogue and honest conversation? And so I think if you start with those pieces, you start to really figure out who you are. But I do agree that there is going to be some contraction, and there's going to be, we're going to start to see how the different brands unfold. And I think the recreational piece, some of the LPs that we've been talking to, they're trying to figure out how they want to approach their recreational brands, because for some of them, it's not necessarily a new brand. It's part of what they're already doing. And so they're trying to figure out, because there's such a different brand benefit and consumer benefit for recreational versus medical, should they be developing a second brand that actually speaks to this audience in a bit of a different way? And so that's a pretty resource-intensive task to do. So yeah, there's a lot to really sort out. And then in terms of differentiating your brand, you can see, you see around the room, there are some brands that are a lot more corporate looking, a lot more buttoned up, and then there are some that are a lot more relaxed and seem a little bit more approachable. And so I think they all serve the industry in different ways. I'm getting a little bit off topic because I'm starting to think about all the different brands in this room. But I think going back to what I said originally, I think starting with what your core values are and your tone and your positioning, what makes you different, helps to figure, or what makes you who you are, and looking at your competition, you'll start to see the white space where you fit in, and defining your tone coming out of that, what your language is going to be like, the types of things you would say and do versus the types of things you wouldn't, helps to clarify your position within the market. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I actually think that's all the time we have. Sorry, guys. Thank you so much for coming. It was really, really great talking to you, and we'd love to talk to someone one-on-one if you guys have any more questions. Yeah.
And we have a little flyer with some info if you're interested. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Very much.